Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. We're happy you could join us. My name is Naya Hyde, and I'm the Marketing Assistant for K-12 Education Products at Brookes Publishing. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. You'll be muted for the webinar, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box. We'll take these questions after the presentation during the Q&A portion of the webinar. For the presentation, you might want to minimize the GoToWebinar bar on your monitor so you can see more of your screen. You can do that by clicking the orange button with the arrow in the top corner of the control bar. If you need to enlarge the bar again to ask a question, you can just click the orange button again. If you experience any audio issues at any point, you can switch to phone by clicking the audio section of the webinar panel and using the dial-in information provided. Also, we are recording this webinar. Everyone who registered for the event will receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email tomorrow. All live attendees will also receive the certificate of attendance in the follow-up email tomorrow. Next slide, please. During today's presentation, Ondine Gross will reference content from her book, Restorative: How to Mediate School Conflicts and Keep Students Learning. This reader-friendly guidebook has a concrete, evidence-based solution, an easy and effective 50-minute mediation technique for teachers and students in grades K-12. This book guides readers through the whole process of starting a teacher-student mediation program, conducting successful mediations, and collecting and monitoring data to measure the effectiveness of the program. You'll also learn how to use the technique to mediate conflicts between students and between adults in schools, including staff members and parents. To learn more about the book, you can visit the URL shown on the screen. Next slide, please. I'm happy to announce that Brookes will be giving away 3 copies of Ondine Gross's book, Restorative. Winners will be randomly selected from today's live attendees and notified by email after the webinar. To increase your chances, be sure to submit your questions in the questions pane throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. Without further delay, I'm happy to introduce today's speaker. Ondine Gross is a school psychologist, licensed therapist, and author of Restorative: How to Mediate School Conflicts and Keep Students Learning. For more than 30 years, she was a school psychologist in diverse California and Illinois public schools. Mid-career, Ondine earned a master's degree in educational leadership from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, as well as a school administrator certification. She also became a volunteer community mediator and in 2011 piloted teacher-student mediation and mediation between students at her diverse public high school. The goal is to improve behavior, discipline, and school climate. The results were positive and immediate and inspired Ondine to write her book and train others. Now, an educational consultant and public speaker, Ondine is dedicated to fostering safe, positive, and affirming school environments. Ondine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm so excited to share with you. And sorry you're not seeing my face, but I'm going to show some slides for about the first half of this 30-minute visit. And then at about the 15-minute point when I'm done, you'll see my face and hopefully I'll be able to respond to your questions. I'm going to go over some things that I did in a school, but I want everyone who's listening to know that this technique that I'm going to share with you on how to do mediation, you can do in your home and with your friends and family. So any questions I'll welcome at the end. So I just want to start by asking a general question of, have you ever heard a student say these words? You know, my teacher hates me. If he doesn't show me respect, why should I show him respect? She sent me out and other people were talking. Or sadly, my teacher is racist. Or have you ever heard a teacher say, she refuses to do any work, she doesn't care, he doesn't show any effort, she comes to class and puts her head down, or simply, I'm all out of ideas. Or then, kind of my favorite, well, not so favorite, but when you see that a student can really cause a disruption in a class and curse and get suspended, but then a few days or hours later return to class as though nothing happened. Or how teachers can write multiple discipline referrals on the same student over and over and over and nothing changes. So you already heard a little intro, but the main point here is that I was seeing all these things over my 25+ year career as a school psychologist, mainly working in high schools, but also working in elementary settings in California and Illinois. And when I went back to school, it was with the idea of, let me see what the best practices are. Let me see what, the smart people at the university are saying. And what I learned was that it was back to us, back to the people who are in the buildings, to develop their own ideas based on their own population. So based on my mediation training and my further education, I had a lot of ideas percolating about how could I use my skills to help. This was my high school. I retired there in 2017 after 26 years. It's in Champaign, Illinois. They allowed me to be honest and use the school, and in the book, there's lots of realistic facts. For example, in 2010, new administrators came in because the whole school had to be restructured because they did not meet adequate yearly progress in raising test scores. So the new administration came into kind of a mess, a lot of frustration, a lot of reacting to problems rather than proactive approaches, office discipline referrals, ODR, and suspension rates, and disproportional representation. And what that means is that students with disabilities or minority students or low socioeconomic level students were getting in more disciplinary consequences than other students, and it just wasn't following along statistical lines. It was just too much. Around that time, I saw a really inspiring TED Talk, which I recommend, which was by an author named Adichie, which is The Danger of a Single Story. And she reminded us that stereotypes or the single story, such as the student doesn't care or my teacher hates me, really replace true understanding. And I thought about that a lot, and also that a typical public school or public high school or middle school doesn't allow time for teachers and students to really improve a relationship. There's no time, there's no place, and sometimes not the skill set to develop the trust and rapport that go into any healthy relationship. Meanwhile, around the country, there was kind of a call to action to break the school to prison pipeline because schools were seeing that kids get in trouble over and over. There's no effective strategies and nothing that's culturally responsive and nothing that was really building a positive and healthy school climate and teaching the skills that students needed. So my school rolled out my idea, which was, can we please pilot teacher-student mediation? I just want to give it a try. I had taken this mediation training. I learned this really simple technique. I'd seen teacher-student conflict over and over, kids shutting down, teachers getting frustrated, and they said, sure. So the slide you see in front of you was the actual slide shown to a faculty of about 100 teachers on the first day back to school after summer break. And this was how it was rolled out, that I, as the school psychologist, would be the mediator, and I would be referred to students, excuse me, who had 3 discipline referrals from the same teacher, or it could be by request. We soon learned that we did not have to wait for 3 discipline referrals from this teacher to the student to do a mediation, and pretty soon people just asked for them. But we also wanted to collect data, and the data we collected is that we would consider it to be a successful mediation if, after the mediation, there were no more discipline referrals from that teacher to that student. We knew this was action research, but this was kind of what I had been inspired to do after going to my university program is, give something a try. Your feet are on the ground, you know the staff, you know the environment, it's just as valid for you to roll something out and collect data and see how it's working than anybody else. And what we soon found out was how helpful mediation can be. And I personally was just blown away by how humane and kind people were in these meetings and how respectful people behaved. And I realized, wow, this is a great tool to really, promote social emotional learning, foster trust and understanding, and also break negative cycles and improve student achievement. What I also loved about it was that it's individualized. There is no one size fits all. Every student is different, every teacher is different, every classroom is different. And really getting a teacher and student together is an individualized way for them to develop solutions, which I'll go over in just a second. And it's efficient and free. I love that part. Schools never have enough money. So I want to tell you how to do mediation. And again, this is for teachers and students, but you can apply this technique widely. So what is mediation? Well, mediation is time honored. It's in the Bible. Mediation has been around forever and basically refers to having a third party who is a neutral, impartial person to help two people resolve a difference. So why would we do this with teachers and students? Well, I've already gone over that the goal is to improve understanding and boost respect and improve effectiveness. But the thing I found by witnessing it firsthand was how therapeutic it is for people to tell their stories and be heard. Human beings deserve this. They deserve to be heard and affirmed. And that when you provide an environment where that happens, you have improved academic achievement and a reduction in disciplinary actions. And I will show you data in this little presentation that we collected. So, conflict is stressful and it diminishes how people feel when they go into their workplace, in their home, in their classroom. And often it can be rooted in class, cultural, or racial bias and misunderstanding. So what teacher-student mediation is, or any mediation I would encourage you to try, is structured. It's a highly structured meeting. It's a safe space and time for people to develop their understanding of one another and develop trust and rapport. And it's also to model good social communication and problem-solving skills. What it's not is an arena where people just come together and tell their sides, or you uncover what really happened or who's telling the truth. The mission is to restore the respect so a teacher can teach and a student can learn. It is not to identify a perpetrator or a victim or meet for the perpetrator to say sorry. That being said, often apologies are offered, but they're spontaneous and they come from a sincere place. The other thing that's different about mediation than just sort of getting everyone in a room to talk is the structure of the mediation itself and the role of the mediator in setting the tone. The mediator is in charge and all parties follow the mediator's directions, and there's real safety in that structure. There's 4 principles of mediation, and these principles are widely used across the country by the American Bar Association. You'll see the note at the bottom, but the 4 principles of mediation I'll go over now. So the first principle is impartiality, and that is the mediator does not take sides. The mediator is there to listen, not to solve problems, not to evaluate solutions or provide options. The mediator is there to even out the communication so each party is perceived as having equal rights and dignity. The meeting is confidential. This gives people confidence in the process. Now, in a school setting, you always want to make sure that you're not making promises you can't keep. And of course, we're all mandated reporters if there's any, child abuse going on. And the people in the meeting, though, once you get parent permission, if that's appropriate for a younger child, they're the ones who were the keepers of this information, and the mediator respects that it's a confidential meeting. The next principle is called self-determination, and that is that what the 2 people talk about is their choice. What they choose to talk about and agree to is their own, and this empowers the participants and helps them feel more effective. And lastly, voluntariness. You come to mediation voluntarily, you stay voluntarily. And this is true in a school, even if you're talking about children or teenagers. It's a completely voluntary meeting. Nobody is ever forced to participate who doesn't wish to. So this is how you do it. First step, make sure it's voluntary. In a school, you want to be sure to ask the teacher and the student. And by the way, in the book, all of these things I'm talking about are much more fleshed out, and lots of examples and details and forms and handouts and so forth. So let's go over what the mediation process is. I'm going to go through each of these, and I know it's a long list, but we'll go through it quickly. So the main thing is welcoming the participants with a smile. And I'm going to kind of talk as though I'm the mediator so you hear the tone. And the idea is to relax people and really be, celebratory that they both agreed to be there. So welcome, come on in. I'm so glad you're both here. Mediation's a great way to resolve conflicts and clear the air and move forward. It's also a way to learn things about other people's perspective. The way mediation works is really simple. I will ask both of you the same question. What brought us here today? I ask that you speak only to me and not to each other. When each person speaks, I will take notes and ask clarifying questions. When one person is talking, the other person can just sit back and listen. It's amazing how much information is picked up this way because people learn things they didn't know before. Once each of you has spoken to me, I will summarize what you have said. I will then ask you to speak to each other and develop your plan to move forward. The rules to mediation are that only one person speaks at a time and there are no interruptions or put downs. There are 4 principles of mediation. 1 is your mediator. I'm impartial, which means I don't take sides. This meeting is confidential. Everyone is here voluntarily. And the last principle is called self-determination, which means that what we do and do not talk about is up to each of you. Are there any questions? Does everyone understand? And is that okay with everybody? So who would like to go first to say what brought us here today? Now, notice that when I was speaking as the mediator, I was talking slower than I normally do, just to make sure everyone hears. And I'm not going to start the meeting by saying, okay, tell your side or give your version, because we don't want to set up sort of a dyad conflict mode. And what I'm doing is I have a piece of paper that I've split down the middle, one side with one participant, the other side with the other, and I'm writing down their exact words because I am not interpreting what they're saying. I'm not adding my own spin on it. I'm simply reflecting, which is like holding up a mirror. And the reason we establish that structure is to put people at ease. Now, it doesn't matter who goes first, but if they turn and try to speak to each other directly, stop and say, you know what, at this point in the meeting, I'm going to remind everyone to just speak only to the mediator, speak only to me. And the reason for that is that it allows you as the mediator to set the tone, to monitor the climate and the calm in the meeting. It prevents also the participants from going back into their own back and forth conflict routine, because participants speak in a different voice when they speak only to the mediator. And this is just a fact that I've seen in doing over 200 of these meetings, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a child, they're speaking in a different voice when they speak to the mediator than they would to each other. As the mediator, you're using reflective, non-judgmental listening to validate the person's point of view. Oh, so you feel like Miss Green is picking on you when you're not the only person talking. I want to make sure I understand this. I give a ton of examples of these in the book and give a lot of tips about communication skills. You're validating their feelings. You're also pausing to summarize. And the reason is that this really helps to modulate the rhythm of the mediation. So someone isn't speaking too fast or too long. You just kind of raise your hand and say, let's pause here for a second so I make sure I understand what you just said. You know, Tony, you've been describing that you were feeling upset about the trash not being taken out. You know, whatever it is, you're, again, just kind of modulating the meeting and the tone and climate. Thanks and praise, thanks and praise, thanks and praise. This was really drummed into me when I took my mediation training. And I have to say that these are words of wisdom because it really relaxes the meeting and it just makes people feel good about the fact that they're there to solve problems. Hey, by the way, I just want to pause here for a minute and thank you both again for being here. It takes courage to have difficult conversations. And I appreciate that you're both here to improve things. You can never do too much thanks and praise, and I vouch for that. So once you're doing the mediation, you really want to see if there's specific details, because when two people come together, there's a lot of details they don't have about each other or even about what happened. And sometimes identifying those specific details are really helpful and really help each other understand the perspective of the other person. Also, giving people the opportunity to identify feelings. Typically in conflicts, people can be upset or mad or frustrated, but there's also a lot of other feelings that come in. And when you're in a school, it's really enlightening for the teacher to be able to talk about their feelings when, they've worked hard to prepare a lesson, they brought a lot of expectations, and then maybe the students were not engaged. But again, to see how it felt when this student was not engaged, because that's the personalized nature of this. And also the student a chance to identify feelings. And again, you're writing down what each person says verbatim in your notes. So something that I kind of saw the wisdom of when I started doing these is mining for gold. And that is really highlighting and eliciting positive statements when you hear them. So even if kind of a throwaway comment like, oh, Randall's done some good work, as a mediator, I would say, oh, so you've seen some good work from Randall, because I really want to bring out those strengths. Or I might just flat out ask, what do you like about the way Ms. Young teaches? And often when people hear these positive remarks, whether they're a child or an adult, it is the most positive and powerful moment in a mediation. You see people relax in their posture, and you see that they are surprised because they truly didn't know that the other person had those positive feelings. So when somebody does do something in a mediation that's really, special, such as acknowledging when they took responsibility for their own actions. As a mediator, I know that my role is also, especially with children, to teach social skills, and I really want to acknowledge these pro-social behaviors. Like, wow, that's really big of you to take responsibility for your rude behavior that day. Thank you for your honesty. Or even to a teacher, that's really nice of you to apologize. Mediations don't require anyone to apologize, so when people do say they're sorry, it's truly appreciated. So by now that you've seen the structure of mediation is having each person talk only to the mediator is taking notes, the mediator is pausing to summarize, the mediator is mining for gold and trying to sort of get the arc of the story. But when one person is finished talking, before you turn it over to the next person, make sure they really have said all they need to say. Hey, is there anything else you'd like to say before we ask the other person to speak? And often I think they're done, but they're not done and they have more. So I'm really glad I remember to ask that question. So when both parties have spoken, you as the mediator provide kind of an overall humanizing but impartial summary that recaps kind of the arc or trajectory of what happened to these people and how they felt about it. Here you're using your notes, so it doesn't feel like you're misinterpreting anything they said. And you're also using this opportunity to really reemphasize the positive statements and the goodwill that's been expressed. And you're remembering your thanks and praise. Wow, this has been helpful. We learned things we didn't know before. Thank you for being here today. It takes courage to be in a meeting like this and shows effort. And by the way, that's really true that effort matters, because if two people agree to be in a meeting like this, remember, it's voluntary. So if they agree to be in a meeting, that's like, 85% of this problem being solved because they showed up and everybody knows that you didn't have to. So now, you've given your summary, and then you say, at this point in the mediation, I'm going to ask you to speak to each other and develop some ideas about how to move forward. And, sometimes people might be stumped or not know quite how to start, but usually they just go right in and they start facing each other. They look at each other, they talk to each other. I have a lot of notes in the book. So for example, in a school setting, something that might come up is identifying a good way for these two people to communicate. And, I've been so touched and moved by the kindness of especially teachers and even students to one another when I sit back and just let them talk to each other, because it really reminds me that they have a relationship. They see each other every day, and they know the context of that classroom. you know, but the other thing is that no two students are alike. Some students might want to touch. Some students might hate if a teacher touches their shoulder. Some might want to post a note. Some might want to hear their name. Some might not want to hear their name. So really, it's what works best for this teacher and this student. Sometimes students have strong feelings about where they sit in a class or who they sit with. They've got sensitivity around, you know, who they're grouped with. And teachers can very easily, you know, accommodate that if it's going to improve a student's performance. And lastly, sometimes the teacher and student just need to talk about, you know, the business of getting on with things. And they, again, know the details of what's happening in the class. I notice you're restless. Would you like to feed the salamander? I mean, it gets really personalized, and it's also humbling for the mediator to see that, you know, their role is just to really sit back and let these two people solve their own, you know, path forward and forge ahead. I put this in the book about developing a written plan or contract. It's really up to the two people. I found sometimes it was helpful, sometimes not, especially if I was mediating between students and we needed a contract. There's lots of examples in the book. And the most important thing is to conclude the meeting with thanks and praise. Thank you so much for being here today. This was honest and respectful. You guys have a good plan to move forward. Great work. If you'd ever like to meet again, just let me know. I'm happy to help. And, you know, I think the reason I was so inspired to write the book is that there were just so many beautiful moments. You know, I once heard a teacher say when a student said that they were unfair, like, you're right, I did get mad at you when Jamal was doing the same thing. It was unfair. When I think back, I think it was because Jamal was also respectful and funny, and that made me treat him a little different. But that's wrong, and I apologize for it. You know, this is a true story, and I just fell out of my seat, and so did the student when this teacher was that human, and it was like, wow, that showed me the power. And that student forever was better behaved because that teacher was so humble and so honest. And or even a teacher saying, you know, you're right, I wasn't at my best that day. And also so many times students apologize about what they did. I talk, I'm rude, I don't get quiet, I have my phone out, I know it's wrong and I want to improve and I'm sorry. You see so many of these moments and it's really, really touching. So as part of rolling this out, we collected data, and I go into a lot of detail in the book about how this rolled out. The high school where I worked had about 1,400 students. So I just wanted to give you a kind of a quick overview that in the course of a 3-year rollout, it really jumped up in terms of the numbers of mediations that we did. From about 33, 34 the first couple of years to about 58 the third year, and it continued on from there. Mostly in a high school of 9th to 12th grade, the freshmen utilized this intervention the most, and sophomores. More males than females, slightly, well, different years. And in a school, as I talked about, with disproportionate discipline, we were very pleased that a lot of African-American students were utilizing this intervention with positive results in a school with mainly white teachers. So I really felt that this intervention of mediation was fostering more trust and better relationships across racial lines. And over the 3 years, we had really good success and effective outcomes with the mediation, which again inspired me to write this book and want to share it out every chance I can. Before I retired, I was talking out loud about how I wish there was a video of mediation so people could really see what it's like. And I was getting ready to retire, and that blonde lady you see in the picture was the choir teacher, and she said, I can help you make a video. And she did. And so there's about a 48-minute video where I'm the mediator, and the teacher and the student are acting, but they're acting with scenarios that they made up, but that are real. And you see teacher-student mediation, and you see also a mediation between students. In the book, I have a whole chapter on how to mediate between students to reduce bullying and other conflicts, a lot of details in there, and you get to see that in action as well. So now's the time where we turn it over to you, and I'm really delighted to interact with you. This is my email, and feel free to email me. Feel free to look on my webpage. Feel free to tweet at me. I would love to network because I'm really passionate about this. So thank you, and I'm going to turn on the video camera, and hopefully you'll see me. Oh, hi.
Hi. Wonderful presentation, Ondine. That was really great. And again, thank you everyone for submitting your questions. Just a quick reminder to anyone with questions, be sure to enter them into the questions pane now. And now let's jump into the Q&A portion of the webinar.
Okay. Can you see me?
We cannot see you, Ondine.
Okay. Oh, wait. There I am.
There we go. Perfect. So we got a lot of great questions today. We'll start with this one from one of our attendees. They asked, how might we be able as educators to transfer this well thought through advice while our students are online? And then along with that, they said respect needs to be at the forefront of education, but how do you do it well in a time like this?
Well, you know, I think that there's some unique challenges by interacting on Zoom, but one thing that I've noticed is that you really do have to listen to one another on Zoom, because if you've ever been on a Zoom meeting where two people talk at once, nobody can hear anything. And in some ways that disciplines us to just pause and listen. So I believe that you can mediate conflict online using Zoom with the same ideas of people following the rules, you know, only one person talking at a time, using the reflective listening. And also it's just surprising how much listening really helps, because when we're in conflict or when we're upset emotionally, nobody listens. We interrupt, we stomp off, we don't stay put. So I think that, I think it can work, and it's voluntary. So if people are willing to try, it's something new. It's a style of communicating that you're not used to. But if people are willing to give it a try, I think that it can really bear fruit.
Great response, great response. Another question we got was, could this apply to parents, family, or caretakers? If so, what would be the parent's role in the mediation?
So I think that it's really important when you're a mediator to say, I'm wearing my mediator hat now, because I face this as a school psychologist in a school. I would say, I'm wearing my school psychologist hat, or I'm wearing my mediator hat, because they knew that when I was in my mediator role, I wasn't going to be typical myself. I was really being disciplined. I was following the rules. I was showing equal respect. I was showing respectful listening and so forth. So I think that a parent can do this if everybody understands that this isn't the typical way we do business around here. We're doing something different and new, and it might feel awkward at first, but it's not just mom being mom, and it's not just kids going at it. We're all agreeing to try this structured thing out.
Nice, kind of like putting a different hat on.
Exactly.
Perfect. Another question we had was, in your own experience, how long does or should it take to get this process started within a school? They mentioned their school has started, but at a very slow pace. And what are your suggestions to help this become a more active thing within their building?
I think that the people that can easily roll this out are people who, are comfortable being mediators. And often in a school, that could be a school psychologist, school social worker, or school counselor, because they're not going to be afraid if people are emotional or this or that. So it can be a standalone thing. It could be as simple as one of those people saying to their supervisor, hey, do you mind if I pilot this year? I want to try this out. Or it can be introduced as in a tiered system of supports, multi-tiered system of supports, RTI, PBIS. I know I'm throwing out acronyms, but and then you can be more systematic and collect data, which is what I describe also in the book, because we did it that way. But it's kind of like you can start small or you can start big. I had been in the building where I had worked for a number of years, so perhaps I had earned some trust by then. I write in the book that I was surprised that nobody complained when we rolled this out, because I thought they might think that it's, outrageous, but nobody ever complained about it, which was really a nice surprise. So I think each building is different. And I think it's important to have some dialogue with people in your building and say, hey, what do you think? Can we give this a try? I would definitely, not to plug my book, but I would definitely read the book because it has a lot more background and research and things before just jumping right in. I'd watch the video. I'd, really want to be confident because you want to be a competent mediator. But it's really up to each person. And, I'd be happy to answer questions by email if people want to roll this out in their schools.
Nice, great book plug right there. Just so we're mindful of everyone's time, this is going to be the last question of the live Q&A portion of the webinar. So another one we got was, I'm an education coach. Do you think this process will work with 2 adults?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that this person asked this question. I happen to be passionate, and I actually write a chapter in the book about adult mediation. Yes, I write in the book, I did one with the whole cafeteria staff at my school because they were having a lot of stress. I have done them with 2 educators. I write in the book, you can do it with parents, with teachers, with administrators, adults. Anyone who's ever worked in schools knows that this is an area that has so much need. We're not like corporate America. We don't have these organizational psychologists that come in and do, we're going to teach you how to have difficult conversations. We don't get that in schools. And I think this is so needed and so welcome. And when it's done respectfully and fairly, like, when you follow those principles of mediation, it is so game changing. After one meeting, this is a 50-minute meeting, which is the way I did it, which is a typical class period in a high school. But with adults, it's also like an hour. And when you think that 1 hour completely changed the course of these 2 people's relationship, it's insane because people can harbor grudges for years and years. So I really recommend it for adults.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for all your great responses, Ondine. We're going to wrap up the Q&A portion, but again, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to submit them in the questions pane. I'd also like to share that we are offering a 20% off discount on our products, including Ondine's book, Restore the Respect, throughout the end of June. Anyone who watches this webinar or the recording can use the code COFFEETALK at checkout to receive the discount. If you're looking for more professional development webinar opportunities over the coming weeks, be sure to visit Brookes Publishing website for the latest additions to our Coffee Chat series. We're hosting chats every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with our esteemed authors, and we would love for you to join us. Again, everyone, thank you for joining us. Ondine, thanks for such a great presentation and spending your afternoon with us. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks so much, Ondine.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.